So these objects are from grave number 1 at Cumwhitton. So we've got this pair of oval brooches, double shelled. So there's 2 layers, joined just around here somewhere. And these rivets here would secure the 2 parts of the shell together. Now these rivets originally would be fastened to a silver cap. And these little holes there and there will be part of a silver wire network that's threaded throughout the channels on the top of the brooch. So obviously quite a lot's missing. Same goes for these holes in the lower shell. There'll be more twisted silver wires there. In addition, there's the part of the lock plate from a chest that was found towards the bottom of the grave, and this is the hasp that would have gone over the top of the lid. And then we've got a key here that was found further up, not far underneath one of these brooches, in fact about that far away from the brooch up at the top of the grave. So there was a little bit of cord found as part of the corrosion products here, and a little bit of the cord found under the loop next to the hinge fittings inside the brooch. So this was probably hanging from one of the brooches, and it seems to fit the spring mechanism. These 3 teeth here on it align well with the spring mechanism inside this lock plate. So this would have been the handle element that slid the bolt backwards and forwards. The bolt would have been inside behind this lock plate, and this hasp here passes through the front of this plate. So you can see there that the this is part of the hasp mechanism. This is the top bit that's snapped off, and the bolt would have moved out of the way and allowed a little loop that went through to lift up and lift the whole lid of the chest off. When you slid it back in position, it would lock in place, and this would be the thing that lifted the springs out of the way, basically. So some very important things from grave number 1 there. So we've got some artefacts from grave number 2 here. Now I'll deal with these first. So we've got a buckle here with the buckle plate's got a silvery appearance. That's because it was copper alloy that had a tinned surface. And you can see the brown on there is the remains of organic material that's corroded to it. We also have this strap end that was found further down the grave. A little bit of the decoration of the strap end still visible there, but most significantly the organic remains on top of the actual strap end here. So there's a little bit of textile. You can see a seam running across the middle, and you can see a little bit of the textile pattern. This one is probably one of my favourite ones, but it's very difficult, and it proves the advantage of 3-dimensionally printed objects like this, because most people struggle to understand what this is in the museum. And indeed, when we found it, some of the specialists struggled. What we actually have here is a comb, a sickle, and some shears all corroded together. Now, I'll bring in 2 of my reproductions to help with this, but I don't have a sickle, so you'll have to excuse me. So the shears here, this is the point of one of the shear blades, and this is the end of the loop here. So that would go there. And then on the top here, the comb is sitting like that. So what these black blobs are the remains of the iron rivets in here, which are actually corroded and exploded out. And then you have a little hollow here, which is where the comb back sat. So it's almost like a negative impression. And then these are the remains of some bits of teeth made out of antler, the teeth here and the comb. Now underneath the whole thing is a sickle, which is a curved shape running around here. And so actually using this 3-dimensional object, 3D printed object, and these reproductions, you can really help to explain to people how things can survive in archaeology, particularly things like these, mineralized remains, how they can corrode together and the shapes that they can make. And it's great because people can pick it up and move it around and understand that, and then also do the same with the reproductions, which you cannot actually do with the original object, obviously because it's so friable it's likely to fall apart. So what we have here is some of the objects from grave number 3 at Cumwhitton. So we've got the sword here in its current condition. Obviously under this corrosion on the real one, there is some fantastic silver inlay, but most of the blades are covered in these large lumps of corrosion product. There's also this folding blade, which I've done a TikTok on. Basically it's like a iron case with a big point on one end and a folding blade inside the case here that would pivot out. And then this ringed pin with a splayed terminal there. It's made of copper alloy, and this would have secured a cloak or something like that, would have been worn. Probably point upwards with a cord tied around this loop here and tied onto the body, passing through the fabric, keeping it in place. So here are some of the artefacts from grave number 4. So we've got this axe head, the shield boss and this ringed pin. Now the ringed pin's slightly different to the one from grave number 3, but you can see there's a little bit of textile remaining around this central section here, a little bit of cloth, and it seems to be a bit of the cord that would have been wrapped around it, which I mentioned in my grave number 3 video. And there's some more organic remains stuck to the outside of this, corrosion products from other things. The shield boss is fairly simple. It's a carinated type, so you can just see a kind of, it mushrooms out after the flat bit that's fashioned to the shield here. Lots of corrosion products again. And the axe head, it's a type E, so it doesn't have like a pointy beard, but it does have like a little step in the blade here. Flat bottom and then a little curve here. Not really steeply bearded. There was corrosion products here. This proved to be oak, because the blade was actually found stuck in the ground like that in the grave. So it'd been slammed into a piece of wood at the base of the grave, possibly a bier or maybe part of the coffin. And then the axe head here, you can see there was quite a large piece of wood, which isn't part of this 3D model. That was separate. But you can see the shape of the axe, and you can actually see, even on the 3D print, you can sort of see the wood grain. Weirdly, this wood was in the round. So it was a solid piece of timber with the pith running down the middle, so it was a whole piece of wood. Usually on these Norwegian type axes, they'll be part of a radially split plank, so they split the axe halves. But this one isn't, and it also proved to be boxwood, which is quite unusual for axe handles. So yeah, that's grave number 4. So these are the objects from grave number 5, and if ever some things needed help to tell their stories, then these are they. These are the poster child. So what we have here is a pair of spurs. So these are my reproductions of them. So as you can see, there's a lot of corrosion product. Now what we have here, these side bits, these tall bits, are the remains of the buckle plate and loop assemblies that stand up. You can see these are on each side. They would have stood up like that. So that is what this bit is at the side here. So it stands up like that. And of course when this is worn, it arches over the top of the foot. And these have corroded in this position, basically. You could still see on x-ray, you could still see all parts of the buckle loops and things, but each one's got one. You can see the split there where the leather went in. And this was separate. And now it may be, I've incorporated it as part of the strap on top of the buckle here. It was a buckle and a strap slide and a tongue. Most of the strap slides that I've observed in Northwest Europe tend to be from garter or spur assemblies, not belts. So, and that's certainly the case here in all the ones I've looked at in Cumbria. So that's what this is. Again, badly corroded. I don't actually think this was part of this spur now. These spurs with the buckles on the side really don't need them to exist, so I suspect this may have been part of the gartering system for the lower leg. Perhaps some sort of leather ones for horse riding, but it could just be heavy woolen ones, as opposed to leg binding, so strapping them up with a buckle makes them stay up when riding on a horseback and rubbing on saddles and things like that. This thing over here is perhaps one of the most spectacular things, but you'd never guess it. Now on an x-ray we could see this was a knife blade here, the point's down here and the handle's down on this end. This is the remains of some of the handle bits. I might even have that backwards, who knows, it's such a mess. But on x-ray you could see part of a forged blade with lots of the twisting in there. Now it was said in the report that it was pattern welded. I didn't actually agree with that. I think it was probably just folded iron, which has patterns in it. But again, these reports aren't written by me alone. It's a collegiate effort, and sometimes when colleagues, you have to kind of agree to disagree on certain things, and some people get their way and others don't, so it is what it is. But here is a reproduction of the knife by Stuart Makin at Jackhammer Forge that he did for me. So you can see here's the handle. He's done it pattern welded, which again, they do exist, so it's not a silly speculation in the period. And then this is the handle element. Now what you can't see here is that the original had lots of tiny bits of silver wire in this pattern here with chevrons running down and up the blade with figure of eights in between and running around the top. Now obviously we had bits missing from about here, but we had small sections preserved showing it was longer. So it would have looked something like that, but you'd never guess it from this lump, would you? So last, but by no means least, this little buckle here from grave number 6. It's similar to the one in grave number 2 that I showed you earlier, and also similar to 2 that we didn't do copies of, from graves number 5 and which was the other one, 4. It's got these bosses on, these raised domed bosses, 5 in this instance, and a ring and dot pattern in a kind of saltire, kind of Union Jack style design across the front, and then again ring and dots and stuff on the buckle loop here separate, and again bits of organic material adhering to it, including a cut leather strap underneath the buckle plate there. So again, a quite small object, and there wasn't much from this grave because it'd been badly damaged by the plough, but nonetheless loads of great information about the early medieval past. So these are, all the videos contain 3D prints. They're not actually original artefacts, obviously, which were done by Alastair at Archaeoptics for Tullie House Museum and Art Gallery in Carlisle, where the original objects are kept. And I've just been asked to basically paint these to make them look like the originals did. They are accurately 3D scanned artefacts, so they really do represent exactly what the original object is like. You know, it's not just a pseudo version of it. And they'll be used for a variety of applications. I imagine over time they're an incredibly useful resource. So yeah, that's what they are. If you get to this section of the video explaining what they are on future videos, it's just the same thing. I'm just going to repeat it, so you feel free to skip it. Not all heroes wear capes.